Welcome back. This is still the Polity reaching you live from Abuja. Now, let's talk about the matter I mentioned earlier, which is the ruling of the Federal High Court on mandating INEC to allow the use of temporary voters' cards for elections. We're speaking about the implications and what it means for the March 18 elections that are set to hold in a couple of days. I've been joined in the studio now by legal practitioner Victor Opatola, Esquire. Good afternoon and welcome to the program.
Good afternoon.
All right, let's start from the basis. We've been talking about it, but we'd really like to break it down so people who don't know what's going on are aware. What is that judgment, or what was the case about, and what does the judgment that came from it mean?
Okay. Sometimes in January and early February, we filed a matter. I filed a matter on behalf of some of my clients who are the plaintiff, in regards to the use of temporary voters card. They have fulfilled all legal requirements to ensure that they get their permanent voters card. But they were issued the temporary voters card, and due to no fault of theirs, they were not able to get their permanent voters card. They've gone severally to the permanent voters card collection center, but they could not get it. And the permanent voters card collection was closed by INEC. This means that they will not be able to vote at the elections. So we approached the court, using the various instrumentalities of the Constitution and the Electoral Act. The court in its decision held that fundamentally, any individual who has registered to vote, who has fulfilled all legal requirements for him to get his permanent voters card, but has not gotten it due to the negligence or ineptitude of INEC, such person is entitled to vote using their temporary voters card. Now, the issue is this: what is the temporary voters card and what is the permanent voters card? The temporary voters card are those slips issued by INEC to individuals who went to register to vote at INEC's at INEC's offices previously. Now, before 2021, there were slips that were issued to people who went to register to vote. By 2021 and early 2022, there were another form of slips issued to people who went to register to vote. Those issued to people between 2021 and 2022, those ones have barcode on them. The previous one that were issued before 2021 does not have barcode on them. Now, there is no substantial difference between the permanent voters card and the temporary voters card. No, the only difference is the plastic nature of the permanent voters card. That is the only difference. Now, the Beavers machine was introduced using section 47 sub 2 of the Electoral Act. This section stipulates that INEC can use card reader or any other technology. So, since we are no longer using card reader, as it was obtainable in the previous elections, 2019 elections particularly, we are no longer using the card reader. What we are using now is the Beavers machine. The Beavers machine, the way it's structured, does not need the plastic nature of the permanent voters card before it can verify or accredit an intending voter. So now let's talk about how Beavers verify a voter. Beavers machine verify a voter through three means. The first means is when the polling officer impute your name, your surname particularly, into the Beavers machine, your details will come up. When the polling agent impute your voter identification number into the Beavers machine, your details will come up. When the barcode for those that registered between 2021 and 2022, registered to vote between 2021 and 2022, they have their barcode on their temporary voters card. That's the slip issued to them. They have their barcode. So when that barcode is scanned by the Beavers machine, your details will come up. Those are the three ways in which you can, in which the Beavers will verify you. So there are two ways in which the Beavers will accredit you. The two ways are using your thumbprint or your facial means to accredit you. Those are the 2 ways. Now, when we look at this, the 3 ways for verifying a voter verification, you will notice very quickly that there is nothing the temporary and the permanent voter's card does that the permanent voter's card, there's nothing the permanent voter's card does that the temporary voter's card do not do. As a matter of fact, if you go to the INEC website, and there's a page where you can verify your status, whether you're in the database of INEC or not, and it come up with your details, your name, your polling center, your details, everything to come up on the INEC website. Even that you can use it for the purpose of verification using Beavers on the day of election. Why am I saying this? What does Beavers need to verify you? Like I said earlier on, it needs 3 things. It needs your name. And all these 3 things does not need to be complete together. If one of them is complete and is inputted into the Beavers, your details will come up. So if the only thing you have is your surname, it will come up. You can go to the website of INEC, print it out. Your details, your surname will be there. Your the last 3 digits of your voter identification number will be there. The only thing that will not be there and the one you will print out is the barcode. And you do not need the barcode the Beavers do not need the barcode to verify you. In the absence of the barcode, your surname, it can use it to verify you. Your the last few digits of your voter identification number, it can use it to verify you. So these are all the arguments to put before the court. And also that no law, the Constitution, the Electoral Act, no law makes a distinction between the permanent voter's card and the temporary voter's card. What the law stipulated was voter's card. There was no distinction. As a matter of fact, there is no form of superiority. So all these are the arguments we put before the court. And the court held in our favor that 1, everybody who has registered to vote and has fulfilled all legal requirements has a right to vote. And such person should not be disenfranchised by, the court used some very heavy words. The court said such person should not be disenfranchised by the negligence, by the ineptitude of INEC to make sure they get their permanent voter's card. In whole, the court held that these people that approach the court can vote using their temporary voter's card. That was the decision of the court.
Well, congratulations on your victory.
Thank you very much.
But, it seems like this was such an obvious thing. Was there an oversight somewhere? Because I was having a discussion with someone the other day, and I said, because I voted during this Beavers period.
Yes.
And, I realized that there is almost no need for the actual plastic, because when I got
as a matter of fact, to push it even more forward, there is no need for a temporary voter's card. The way the Beavers machine is structured, each polling unit is programmed with its own Beavers machine. That means everybody that registered in a polling unit, everybody that is supposed to vote in a polling unit, the information is on that particular Beavers machine. That is why INEC said 750 people for one polling unit. And for polling unit who has more than 70 people, everybody that's supposed to vote in that place has their information structured in that Beavers machine. So you can go there with your surname, they will check. Is the surname there? If it's there, his details will come. At the point of verification, that is your thumbprint and your facial, what's the name. If there is a mistake, there's a discrepancy in surname, and maybe your surname came up and it's not you, at the point of verification where you're using your thumbprint and your facial verification, it will show that it's not you. And upon 3 trials, if your thumbprint does not match, your facial verification does not match, that's all. You can go home. You won't vote. So what we are saying is that there is no need for the compulsion of permanent voting. We are not in the era of card reader that needs plastic nature of the permanent voter's card. What the Beavers need to verify you is mere information that can be imputed into the Beavers machine.
You said something, I don't know if you can touch on that a little bit more. The card reader, how did that work? Or did that require?
The dispensation of the card reader, because of the nature of the card reader, needs the plastic nature of the permanent voters card, because it will be slotting into the machine. Then the details will be read into the machine to verify the voter. But we are no longer in the era of the card reader. The era of the card reader is far gone. What we have now is the Beavers machine, which does not need the plastic nature. The plastic nature of the permanent voters card. What is important is the information. And let me state very quickly, the what's the name? The plastic nature of the permanent voters card does not store information necessarily on its own. It doesn't. Your surname, you can even go to the polling unit and tell them your surname. They will check the Beavers machine. When they check the Beavers machine, if it is there, okay, they say your details, oh, these are your details. It is matching. If at the point of verification, you went to put your thumbprint, nobody has the same form of thumbprint. And if your name came up, you put your surname, it came up, and it's not you. At the point of verification, which is your thumbprint and your facial, it will show, it will be obvious. So you can't dupe the system.
Right, but but I feel like INEC might disagree. There were some issues raised by the spokesperson or the coalition of united political parties, which is basically opposition parties, last year, about how they were going through the registers and finding different persons who shouldn't have been there, and issues like that. And one of the concerns they raised was that if these names have already appeared in the register, it means that the fraud that is possibly going to happen is that whoever these persons are, there must be some way that they will be verified that day. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bothered to put them on the register. So could that be one of the loopholes they're trying to avoid? I'm just trying to understand why like so many millions of people won't be able to vote because they just don't have a plastic card.
Now, you see, that is not even the tiniest reason for INEC to still be rigid on this matter. Because there are two ways. First, you'll be verified. If you are not verified, you can't vote. After yes, first you'll be verified. After verification is accreditation. Even if you pass the stage of verification that your details came up and they say, okay, join the queue. At the point of voting, you have to be accredited. Nobody has two thumbprints. Nobody has two facial expression verification. Do you understand what I'm saying? Nobody. So you put your thumbprint. Once you put your thumbprint, it accredits that it is truly the person whose details came up when we inputted his or her surname. So you can't escape both. Even if some persons whose name are not supposed to be on the database, they manage to verify them. At the point of accreditation, it will show if it is a contrived situation. So what I'm saying is, you can't dupe the system. If you're not the one that is supposed to vote, at the point in which you're using your thumbprint, it will be obvious. If Mr. A went to register to vote, they will take your picture, they will take your thumbprint, they'll take your details. And if instead of Mr. A voting, Mr. Y now went to vote in place of Mr. A, even if his surname, he claimed that his surname is the one and his details came up, what is at the point of thumbprinting? It will be obvious that the thumbprint of Mr. A cannot match with thumbprint of Mr. Y. So that is the way the system is padded up to ensure that nobody beats the system.
All right, so it's still quite surprising that INEC
No. See, there have been various arguments.
Yeah.
INEC knows this, but there have been various arguments. We have to look at it from different angles. There's the economic angle.
All right.
The economic angle of printing the permanent voters card. You have to admit that billions on billions goes into printing of permanent voters card. That is the economic angle. Whether you like it or not, some persons are gaining, and you can't just brush it aside very easily. So some interests are vested into this. And the rigidity of the institution to change, you have to put those things into factor. Now we have gotten this judgment since last week Thursday. Till today, INEC has not issued a statement, knowing fully well that millions of people's right is at stake here in this matter.
Yeah, that is interesting. Still speaking on, the way INEC is responding to this, one would expect that, or let me put it this way, it seems as though we already where we were heading for as a country. The country has always been saying we want things done digitally. Breaking down this conversation, what it basically means is that just going on to INEC portal, registering for your PVC is literally all you need to vote. I mean, based on the breakdown, because the everything you've said now, okay, I actually don't know what the process is from the beginning, but for people who want to transfer, I know you just fill in some things, you take your photograph and you send it, and that's it. So, in the process of getting a temporary voter's card, does it require physical appearance?
Good. Now the issue is this. See, we are getting to a fully digitalized electoral process. The only part so far that is still with INEC is the process of registration. That process, you need to go into the office of INEC and take in the required evidences that you're a Nigerian, that you're above 18 years old. All this evidence, you take it into the INEC office and they get your details upon satisfaction, and they input your details into the voters register of INEC. That part is sacrosanct. It's for INEC. The part of collection of PVC, now it is obvious using Beavers. Now, for instance, now even if you don't have your temporary voters card, do you know you can go to INEC website, that page that verifies your that verifies your details, that your details is on INEC data page, that's CVR or something, INEC/CVR or something. You can print your details, print it out, take it to the polling unit. That printout will have the last few digits of your voter identification number. It will have your name and your surname. It will have your polling unit or polling center. It will even have your ward on it. So what is the need of the endless queue at the polling, at INEC offices to get permanent voters card? In the long run, there's no need. But that is taking it even beyond the scope of what we have.
Yeah.
But what the judgment says is, so far you've fulfilled the legal requirement of the law and your name is contained in the database of INEC, then you have your temporary voters card, and INEC has refused to issue your permanent voters card, then you can vote using your temporary voters card.
I think it seems pretty straightforward and reasonable, and you wonder why there would be any pushback, although you've hinted at some. So that being said, away from the legal aspect now, yes, what do you think this could do? Okay, first of all, just a breakdown for people who don't know. A federal high court has given a ruling.
A judgment,
sorry. So, to the average Nigerian, what should this mean? You made mention of INEC not releasing a statement. We have the same issue happening with the cash issue. The Supreme Court gave a judgment. I had a lawyer on here who made a statement the other day, which I really love the statement, and I keep repeating it. He said something about an old case. I don't know how you guys quote it, but basically the court said the court is not final because it is infallible. It is infallible because it's final. So when the judgment is made, as a Nigerian who has not seen any statement, how am I to compose myself?
Okay. Now, there's the judgment. Two people went to court to determine their right to use temporary voters card to vote. The court said, amongst other things, the court said these two people can vote using their temporary voters card. Also in the judgment, the court said anybody who has registered to vote and has fulfilled all legal requirements and their name is contained in the database of INEC and have their temporary voters card can vote using their temporary voters card, considering the nature of Beavers, that Beavers does not need permanent voters card, the plastic nature of permanent voters card, to vote. Now, when you are looking at a judgment, what you will look at is the principle, the applicability of the principle. One thing I must state very quickly is that equality is equity. If there is a law that applies to two people and says that these two people, if they fulfill this legal requirement of the legal requirement that entitles them to vote, and their name is contained in the INEC database, if they have fulfilled it, then they are entitled to vote using temporary voters card. And there are millions and millions of people who are in the same shoe, fact, and law as these two people. These millions of persons, by the principle laid down in this judgment, are entitled to vote. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. If these two people who have fulfilled the legal requirement to vote, one, their name is contained in the INEC database, two, INEC has refused and failed and neglected and due to their ineptitude to issue them their permanent voters card, three, they are entitled to vote for these two people. Then there are other millions of Nigeria who has registered to vote and fulfill all legal requirements of the law, one. INEC has refused to issue them their permanent voters card and their name is contained in INEC database, two. INEC has refused to issue them their permanent voters card, three. They are entitled to vote for. Why am I putting it this way? I'm putting it this way to show that the fact applicable to these two people who went to court is the same fact and law that is applicable to millions and millions of people. So if these two people can get this order of court and INEC has not appealed, even if they have appealed, they've not gotten a valid judgment of court of appeal against this judgment of Federal High Court. That means this judgment is still subsisting and valid, and it is the law. Then INEC has no other option than to comply with this particular judgment. This judgment, these two people, INEC must allow them to vote using their temporary voters card. And like I said earlier on, equality is equity. INEC cannot pick and choose whose right it will violate and whose right it will upload. If the fact and law applies to those two people, and there are millions of people whose fact and law also applies to this situation, then INEC is supposed to allow these millions of people to vote using their temporary voters card. Simple.
All right, that's fair enough. But I think the third or the fourth condition there, I'd like to break it down a bit. It says if INEC through is it negligence or ineptitude doesn't, what does that mean for maybe someone who just didn't pick up their card?
Now, for people who doesn't pick up their card, now the issue is this: did they make effort to get their card? For instance, now during the collection of PVC, there are millions of people who went to get their permanent voters card, but due to no fault of theirs, they couldn't get it. They couldn't. Maybe due to the long queues, due to the ill planning of INEC, they just couldn't get it. Would they say that their rights should be violated because they can't have their permanent voters card? Meanwhile, the same work that this permanent voters card will do, the temporary voters card will do it. And their name and details is contained in the INEC database. So the important thing is, so far their name is contained in the INEC database, then they can vote using their permanent and their temporary voters card. The question is, if I go to the polling center with my temporary voters card, the details of my temporary voters card, will I be able to use it? Will the Beavers be able to use the details to verify me? Yes. So why not? Why won't people want to go to get their to vote? Don't let's forget that voting is a right. Voting is a right in this country. So people should be able to go to vote using their temporary voters card.
That's fair enough. All right. Now, like I said, let's move a little bit from the legal aspect. What do you think this could mean for, in terms of voter apathy and turnout? For those who've heard about the judgment, do you foresee an obstacle or an increase in perhaps people coming out to vote, knowing now that, the thing that was holding me back before is no longer there?
Now, this judgment is a tectonic shift when it comes to electoral jurisprudence in this country. It is a landmark shift when it comes to election in this country. Now, if you notice, there was serious voter apathy this year. The numbers of people who came out to vote reduced considerably this year. It can be due to various reasons. probably because a lot of people were not able to get their permanent voters card. But with this judgment, anybody who doesn't have his or her permanent voters card can use their temporary voters card to vote. If you don't have your temporary voters card because of the paper nature of it, you can go to INEC's website, print out your details, take you to the polling unit. What is important is your surname and the last few digits of your voter identification number. They can either use your surname to verify you using Beavers, or they use the last few digits of your voter identification number to verify you using Beavers to vote. Simple.
All right, that's fair enough. All right, now let's talk about more broader issues leading up to the the governorship elections in March 18, 2023. The issues are still bordering on INEC and adherence to rules. There are actually a number of issues, and I wonder how, I'd like to get a legal perspective on this. We have a particular candidate before the election who the national chairman of the party had a judgment against, a Supreme Court judgment, which mentioned something about where the primaries was held. Now, the candidate that eventually emerged on the INEC list was not the candidate that the judgment indicated, at least for where the primaries held, but it went on. We had another candidate for the, I think, the Action Alliance, a number of judgments against them. So I'm wondering, what do all of these mean for, INEC and the elections? Can the party, I was referring to ABGA actually, okay, can that party come back now and say, what you did or the name you put on your list wasn't the official list, and, long story short, take them to court? If such a party should win, what happens to the election? Because it seems as though there were a number of discrepancies or court judgments that were not acknowledged, so to speak. Take, for instance, the issue of this of temporary voters card. If an election should go ahead and INEC officials at different places are telling people who have temporary voters cards to step back, to not vote, what do these things have on the impact of the election? Are they big enough to have an effect?
Now, the issue is this. First of all, these political parties who got judgments and INEC do not follow through with this judgment, they can sue INEC, for not following through with the judgment of the court. But on whether or not to have impact on whoever won, for instance, the fact that they didn't feel the right candidate for APGA, it will depend. It will depend on the argument their lawyers can canvass, and also if it is substantial. If it will substantially affect the election. You understand? So the question will be, if Mr. A, who ought to be on the ballot for APGA, the slot for APGA was on it, will it have substantially affected the outcome of the election? If it doesn't, then they can't annul the election at all. So what the court will be looking at is substantial. And meanwhile, some of this judgment, it is good if you sit down and read them yourself, because before you can determine whether this is what the court said or this is what not the court said.
That's interesting. It is true. Whoever it favors might paint it in the way that it best suits them. Yes. But still speaking on, INEC and INEC's respondents to issues, I don't know if we can speak about the issue of transmission of results. Okay. It has generated a lot of conversation and debate. Now, even lawmakers, speaking specifically about the Senate president, have said that some Nigerians misunderstood what the Electoral Act says. Now, I believe INEC's major argument, even though it has not officially come out to say this, there are hints here and there, is that they retain the rights or the power or the authority to review how elections results will be transmitted. What do you make of this? Is that really the case? Is it really up to them? Is it on a whim? Okay,
I want to get exactly what you mean by review, when you said review.
I think they mean the manner. When the Senate President talks, it's when, I don't know if it was the Senate President, but when the arguments came, it was that INEC should be able to say, based on what we are seeing right now, we are going to transmit results manually. Based on what we're seeing right now, we'll go electronically. That they reserve that right to pick either or, and they are not bound by it. Yeah.
Now, the issue is, first, the Electoral Act gives INEC, the power to make regulation on the best way to transmit results. Okay, and INEC regulation has stipulated the ways in which it will transmit results. And I'm also aware of a particular section of the guideline of INEC, which talks about if there's a delay in transmission, whether they can transmit it manually or as the case may be, So, like I always say, it is the law. There will always be various views and arguments about the law. There can never be one particular position, especially in regards to a very controversial issue and very high-staked issue such as this. What is important is that these parties have amicably resolved to go through the legal process of determining who won, who was right, and who was wrong. Like I said earlier on, the Electoral Act, it is not in dispute. It gave INEC the right to make regulation as to the proper procedure of transmitting this result. INEC made a provision as to the proper means of transmitting the result. But also in the electoral, in the guideline, I can't particularly remember the section immediately, it also give them a leeway. Say, if this transmission is not, effective immediately, whether or not, we can do it manually, pending when the transmission of result will be effective. That is the argument. That is INEC's argument. So whether it is justiciable or not, because the issue of justiciability will come in, whether it is right, whether it is legal, first, whether it is legal, whether it is justiciable, all these issues will come up. Whether the first thing they ought to do is transmit the result. All these are arguments that are open, and I'm sure their lawyers will canvass it.
Right, that's fair enough. I think the main issue has just been the silence. There's no. These are all speculations and what people for and against are saying.
The funniest thing is this election. There are so many issues on the table. Not only the transmission issue, the issue of 25% FCT.
Yes, I was about
still
to
there.
Up, yeah.
There's so many issues. Even if transmission of result is there, the likely issue of annulment is still there. Because one of those things the court will be looking at is, okay, let's assume that INEC scaled through this issue of transmission. The issue of fraud that was perpetuated during this election. That Peter Obi's lawyer are saying, okay, there were instances of fraud, all these things in election will be resolved, whether or not it is substantial. If it's substantial, how does it affect the numbers of Tinubu? How does it affect the numbers of Peter Obi? How does it affect the numbers of Atiku? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So there are lots of issues on the table. And for now, nothing is certain. Even annulment is still on the table. Like I tell people, annulment is on the table. Because if there's substantial fraud, and you can't determine which numbers ought to go to who and what number, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Then there can be annulment on the table. If the court says that Mr. Tinubu, if the court says Tinubu ought to have 25% and doesn't have 25%, that means we have to come back to the drawing table. Say, okay, Tinubu doesn't have 25%, but he has majority number. Do you understand? Okay, now, they first now resolve, does the fraud that happened, does he remove from his majority number? Does he add to Peter Obi's number? Does he remove from Peter Obi's number? Does he add to Atiku's number? There are a lot of calculations that will be on the table in this election trial.
Could this be the most, will I say, difficult case after a presidential election?
No, you see,
has there been more?
No,
because it seems there's so many issues.
Complicated, but I don't really think it's that difficult. Why I say it's not that difficult? You see, the funniest thing is some of these issues, because this is law. It is law. Some of these issues might not even get to be determined.
How so?
Now, do you know that the issue... Now, see, when it comes to electoral matters, technicalities are bound. What if there's a technicality and we don't even get to the issue of 25%? There are numerous, okay, now, machinals matter. Do you know that the substance of the matter was not decided? What was decided, why it was thrown out by the Supreme Court was, you came by originating summons, and you ought not to come by originating summons. Simple. The substantial matter was not decided. I don't even understand what I'm trying to say. Right. The substantial. So there are chances the substantive matter itself will not be decided, and it will just be one technical matter that will throw out the whole issue. In 2019, Buhari and Atiku, what was decided was that part of what was decided, what actually determined the matter, was that they ought to have brought the people in those places where they claimed there was fraud, there was election malpractice. They ought to have brought people, to testify, and not only their affidavit. That was one of those things that majorly determined that matter against Atiku. So this election tribunal is not a closed matter. It is not a dunked matter, or how do they say it? There are still a lot of vagaries. There are still a lot of things that can happen. It's still open. It's not closed.
All right, but I'd like to get your thoughts or your comments on that 25% issue.
For me, it's not about my comment. It's what the law says. Now, I'll now say something. When the law was when the Constitution was listing the list, was making the list of all the states in this country, was FCT part of it? FCT was not part of the states in this country. We have 36 states. That means FCT is not a state. Now, the section of the Constitution saying, talking about the state and FCT, it shows that the state is different from FCT. Also, the section that is talking about FCT, because some persons have relied on this particular section of the Constitution that says FCT should be treated like a state. So I'm a man. If I have to be treated as if I'm a man, that means I'm a woman. I don't know if this is my phone, for instance. If I have to treat my phone as if it's a phone, that means it's not my phone. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. For me to treat Mr. A as if it's Mr. A, for me to treat something as if it's Mr. A, that means it's not Mr. A. I can only treat Mr. B as if it's Mr. A. I can't treat Mr. A as if it's Mr. A. So, the first schedule lists the states in this country. FCT is not part of the state. This Constitution states that 2/3 of the states and FCT, and 25% of the states and FCT. FCT is not a state. That is why there is and FCT. That's it.
Right, that's fair enough. I think this is one of the issues that we hope technicalities won't mar. We'd like to have a final answer for that issue. All right, but still, just speaking generally, what are your thoughts ahead of the governorship elections, taking into account the way things have happened so far? Do you think there's a lot of faith in the process, and also the fact that I don't know, perhaps others have, but till today officially we are still yet to have an actual answer to that question, why there was no electronic transmission of results. But before that, let's quickly take this call and then we get your comments. Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, please, what's your name and where are you calling from?
I'm Mohammed Yusuf Ahmed. I'm calling from Kaduna State.
All right, Mohammed, welcome to the program. What's your name? Please go ahead and make your contributions.
Okay, so I'm watching the program. It's going in a nice and good way.
Thank you.
And the analyst is trying all his best to dissect everything. And what I want to contribute is the issue of the presidential election.
All right.
For me, I think this is one of the best elections ever happened in this country, because we see a lot of
I said, how so? Please go ahead.
We see a lot of things that happened in this election. Number one, Kano, you understand? Even Mr. President, he lost his head. And again, if you look at the way the election was conducted, there are some people that are even thinking or even projected that the crisis might even erupt after the announcement of the result and the rest. But Nigerian people are wiser now. I don't think there is anybody that will call for violence or anybody that will go to street, start burning tires and the rest. You understand?
Right.
So we are so happy, and we are praying to Almighty Allah to bring peace to this country, despite some hitches in the issue of the process. I'm talking about the transmission of the result from the Beavers to the INEC. You understand? And I even heard the INEC are saying that they are in fear at that time. Hackers are trying to hack. I just got it now in one of the television stations. You understand? So we are praying to Almighty Allah for everything, and we are calling the attention of all Nigerians that they should go out and exercise their franchise in a good way, without fear of anything. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks for calling, Mr. Mohammed. Thank you. All right. I guess he has made his own analysis there. I think that's always been in conversation about the candidate that won losing his state, amongst other issues.
Yes.
But let's hear from another caller before we move ahead. Hello, good afternoon. You're on through the Polity. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Good afternoon. My name is Solomon Oriafo.
All right, Mr. Solomon, please go ahead.
I'm calling from Ekboma, Edo State.
All right, it's good to have you. Let's hear from you.
Thank you. I'm very, very happy this afternoon concerning the matters arising that people are talking about. The young man with you there, God will give you long days.
Amen.
Amen.
That man has spoken my heart. That man knows what he's doing. I'm so happy. I just want to call to congratulate that young man.
Thank you.
That young man has something upstairs.
Thank you so much.
And you too, Amadi, God will bless you for this work you are doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling.
God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Thank you so much for that. Let's move on now and just some general thoughts ahead of the governorship elections. Now we have elections happening. It's still nationwide actually, but some states are off-season elections in the governorship or perhaps not State House of Assembly. What do you predict happening, or generally your thoughts ahead of this time?
First of all, what is important first, if INEC is an impartial body, as it's claimed, is that it should issue a public statement in regards to this judgment and allowing people to vote using their temporary voter's card. Because first of all, like I said, INEC needs no special technology to allow people to vote using their temporary voter's card. It needs no special technology. It needs no additional, it needs nothing to add to what is already on ground to allow people vote using their temporary voter's card. That's the first thing. The second thing is in regards to the mistakes that happened in the previous election, so that it won't happen again. There are instances of inefficiency on the part of INEC. INEC needs to beef itself up and ensure that such instances do not repeat themselves. Then the third thing is in regards to the security of people that are coming to vote. In the last election, there are various instances of security issues, where people's lives and properties were put at risk. So all these issues should be looked into. These are important issues that will ensure that people come out en masse to exercise their franchise. What people don't understand, like I keep telling people, is that election is first and foremost a political science jurisprudence before it is a legal jurisprudence. Election, when people come out en masse to vote, it is a form of legitimacy on the government that emerged from that process. Election itself is a form of conflict resolution mechanism. If people come out en masse to vote for a particular candidate, whatever conflict might emerge after that election will automatically solve itself. Because one, it will be glaring that people came out en masse to vote. It will be glaring that the result of this process, if it is free and fair, is the will of the people. So it is important that all these 3 or 4 things that I've listed, it is effectively observed to ensure the legitimacy of whoever emerged from the process.
All right, thank you so much for that. We do hope INEC takes some of your recommendations and do as you said. But before you leave, just like a final question on the elections. There is the issue of people getting worried. Like you already mentioned, that coming out is a sign that it's legitimized and so on. But there's a worry, so to speak, that it seems at the end of the day, it's almost like the courts are the ones, doing the election. They get to decide at the end of the day. Is that something that can even be avoided? No matter how transparent or faulty an election will be, there will be someone contesting at the end of the day. So is it really the courts, because people cite some issues. They say someone came 4th or 3rd and became governor, polling units were cancelled, people were disenfranchised, and that means and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, is this something that can be avoided? Definitely there will always be someone who is not completely okay with the way things went, and they have the right to go to court. Is this something that can be avoided?
First of all, courts and election have been synonymous for a while. The clamor is that court reduces the level of their interference with election.
Is that possible?
Like I said earlier on, first and foremost, election did not start as a legal jurisprudence. It started as a political science jurisprudence. Now, in order to reduce these instances, INEC has to take its job seriously. And people have to understand the process of administrative law. Let me give you an instance. During the presidential election, when there were issues, there were complaints, the process INEC was supposed to go through. Okay, now, let me start from complaints. When there were complaints, those complaints need not be oral. They need to be formal, in form of petition. So at state level, party agents will make a formal complaint on record and send it to the state rec. The state rec will give a decision on record. You understand? You give a decision. When they come to the National Collation Center, they will raise the chairman, INEC chairman will ask, has this been done? Has this been done? Then party agents that are there will formally file their petition. Then the national chairman will decide on it on record. INEC has 7 days to review elections that has happened all over the country and make decisions. So the effect of this is the administrative law effect. That means that INEC as an administrative body, as there's this principle of administrative law in which in certain things court defers to certain decisions of INEC. There's intrusive there's intrusive what's the name? There's intrusive principle. There's deferential principle of administrative law. In some instances, court will intrude into the decision of INEC. In some instances, court will defer to the decisions of INEC. Because whether or not we like it, the court is not an expert when it comes to election matters. For instance, this CBN monetary issue, the court is not an expert on monetary policies. There are some people that have gone to school for close to 30 years on monetary policies. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So in some instance, the court should defer to the expertise of these expert institutions. CBN is an example of expert institution. INEC is an example of expert institution. The court should only decide on weighty constitutional matters alone. There are some issues that should administratively solve themselves. For instance, if the margin between the winner and the loser is less than 1%, that should automatically trigger recount. Automatically. It should automatically trigger recount of the votes totally in that state. For instance, that happened in Kogi State. This woman, I've forgotten her name. Natasha. Yeah. If the vote, the discrepancy between the winner and the loser is less than 1%, automatically that should trigger a recount. So what am I saying? The court should establish or should recognize certain areas it needs to defer to the expertise of INEC. Then, if the only reason why to not intrude into those expertise is if those expertise does not, if those decisions of INEC does not follow the law, that is the only reason it should intrude and not defer to INEC. The court should defer on some instances to INEC. In this way, everything will not be going to court again. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. Yeah. The court cannot sit down and count vote. It is for INEC to sit down and count vote. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And so these instances, if there is deference, if the principle of the differential principle is acknowledged, the truth is we cannot totally pursue court out of the electoral system. We can only minimize it. One of the ways of minimizing it is what I've mentioned, the differential principle of administrative law. That the only way and manner in which the court will not defer to INEC is if that leeway that was given to INEC to decide some matter, if INEC, one, infringe the rights of the parties, if INEC does not follow the law, those are the only ways the court should intrude.
That's fair enough. I think that's been very enlightening. It shows that the education has to be across board. You know, everything.
Our administrative law for our institutions, all government institutions, must take administrative law serious and paramount. That is the only way.
Indeed, indeed. I can see that. The question has been answered expertly. I asked for how this could be reduced or if it could be avoided, and I think that's just it. People should also know more about their internal affairs before seeking the courts to wade into the matter. But anyway, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for breaking it down and shedding more light on the matter. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, that's all we take on the program today. But be sure to join us every weekday, 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. The Polity comes to you live from Abuja. For now, I'll leave you with some updates for the week, and then see you tomorrow for more conversations on the polity, on politics, governance, and the state of the nation. Have a nice day. I am Amadou Nobewe.